Are you ready to be set free today? Do you believe that the silence sets you free? I was recently at a service, a sacred service, and there was about a 45-minute meditation that was led by a yoga teacher, someone who had studied a great master yoga teacher. And it was not your traditional unity meditation where you come in and there's a lot of silence. It was a lot of instruction on breath work. So doing a lot of the practices that I know from being a yoga instructor, but some different ideas were presented. And as I was listening and experiencing this practice and learning from this teacher who had really studied some of the depths of this yoga, she was explaining how to do some breath work to get in tune with one's intuition. And as we were practicing this, she had us drawing in the air and bringing the attention to the third eye. Now, I have had a practice, an intuitive practice for a while. You know, we all have things that we do to get centered and practices that we engage that we know ground us. And as she was explaining this, I had this recognition that this is a practice that I use. Now, I've never been taught it. I had no idea, but I have something that happens in me when I center in a certain way and I focus on a certain point and I bring the energy and the attention and the breath to that point. And to me, it grounds me and it feels like I just open up and relax into a different space. So here I am sitting at a meditation workshop about a yoga teacher that has been known throughout the ages to have these insights into how we can activate our brains and our spirits and our breath work in order to open up a portal. And that information had been available to me with no name, no instructor, no book. Do you get it? Yes. Do you believe it? Do you believe that if there is some sort of a spiritual principle, an activity, a law, an idea, a resource, a tool for each one of us to use in our practice, that it exists in the field of consciousness that is available and accessible to each one of us all of the time, regardless of our education, our wealth, our families, our culture? Do you believe that? It was always something that never made sense to me in the traditional Christian teaching about Jesus the Christ, that if you lived on an island somewhere and no one talked to you about the master teacher, no one gave you a Bible, if you lived somewhere in some country where there was a different spiritual practice, that somehow you wouldn't be saved or reach enlightenment or have all the support of God mind because you didn't have those words or those teachings that came through humanity as a form of a teaching that were given to someone who would call themselves a Christian. That never made sense to me. It never made sense to me because I believe in the power of spirit. And do you think that God would limit God's self to a language that only meets certain people where they are on the planet? Or do you think that God's language is so expansive and so expressive and so amazing that God, spirit, absolute source, will take anything and everything that you know and custom design it in a language that you can hear and give it straight to you, straight into your mind and your consciousness and your heart? Do we think God cares about the language? Do we think that electricity cares what you call that socket? It's irrelevant in God's mind, right? Because it is about our nature. The sacred scriptures tell us that the law is written upon our hearts, that it was delivered to our minds, that it is there in each one of us, written upon your heart and delivered to your mind. That means there is nothing we can do to get rid of it. It is in us from the beginning of creation. It is in us in our true nature, and it is in every being, every soul. Now, all of the tools on the outside help us access that. They help us remember. They help us when we tend to get caught up in the hypnosis of day-to-day life and the expectations of the outside world. But within each one of us is everything needed and necessary for our spiritual growth and our evolution. Amen? So the funny thing is, we don't always practice that, do we? Today we're going to explore Lent. Who has ever had an experience with Lent in the past? Yeah. And many of us haven't, right? So I grew up Catholic, so Lent was a part of my growing up. And it's a part that I really valued as an adult more than as a child. Now, in Unity, the Lenten practice is different, but just to orient you, if you haven't even thought of the idea for a long time, or you thought, now I'm Unity, so we don't do Lent anymore, which is an option. But let me just orient you to the power of what this practice can be. Lent is the 40-day period between Ash Wednesday and Easter, and then it includes the Sundays as well, leading up to that point. It is a time of rebirth. It is a 40-day period of renewal. Charles Fillmore wrote a book, Keep a True Lent, and in that book, he says this: Lent is a church institution, and there is no authorization for it anywhere in the New Testament. The idea, however, has a sound spiritual basis. Moses, Elijah, and Jesus himself set a precedent for it. Each observed a 40-day period of prayer and fasting as a preparation for spiritual work. Moses received the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai at the conclusion of his fast. Elijah talked with God on Mount Horeb at the conclusion of his period of prayer and fasting. Jesus began his great spiritual ministry at the close of his fast in the wilderness. He goes on to talk about the symbolism of 40 days in Hebrew history. In Hebrew numerology, 40 in their minds was a foursquare number, suggesting the idea of a foundation for something to follow, an idea of completeness. It indicates a completed preparation for something to follow. He goes on to say, Lent, then, is a church institution embodying an exalted idea, the idea of cleansing and discipling both mind and body toward the end of making them more receptive to the Christ idea. Like many other religious practices, it is too often observed in letter, but not in spirit. So a lot of times when we hear about Lent, we hear about this idea of withdrawing from something that maybe we desire, maybe to get us in touch with the suffering, get us in touch with withdrawal, get us in touch with discipleship and not having something that we want. A lot of times that ends up being chocolate or meat. But what else can it be? What else can it mean for us? What would we be? Who would we be? How would we be at the end of 40 days if we took on an expansive practice? In Unity, we practice that Lent is not a time necessarily of giving up one of these substances, but that we can really activate and take on a practice of giving up a thought or a belief system that no longer serves. To cleanse the mind, to cleanse the spirit of something that is inherited not from this space, that it is written upon our hearts, and that it is programmed into our very culture, very mind, very being of God, but one of those outside influences that's ready to go back into the nothingness from which it came. One of those inherited ideas from the world, of the worldly, that doesn't serve. Lent can be the practice of that, of releasing and giving up a thought that we have been feasting on, that has led us down paths of separation or error or emotional discord. I like the idea of creating an acronym that supports the spiritual practice. So for Lent, I created the acronym, Live and Embody a New Thought. Live and embody a new thought. Because here's the deal. If we choose to take on this 40-day practice, and it's a choice because it's a commitment like anything, if we choose to take it on, at the end of this practice of using a denial, using a release, we will be living and embodying a new thought. This is the path to living and embodying a new way of being. Because at the end, there will be a new self there. There will be a new self there, not because we put it in with tons of affirmations, but because something was removed that we weren't possibly even aware was blocking our good. This is not a diet. It's not a practice of saying, I'm not going to have something that I want for 40 days, and then after that, I'm going to be the same person. If we take it on, this is going to be something that if I don't partake in this for 40 days, the desire, the association, and the identification with it at the end of this process will have vanished. It will have been transmuted. And a new life will be there waiting. Are you ready? Yes. Amen. So think to yourself for a moment, or just allow it to come to you. What is going on that you can no longer afford to have in your life? What is something that's going on, a thought, a belief, an emotional programming, experience, whatever it is? Is there something going on? And just one, don't get too excited here. Some people with Lent start pulling out the little notebook and start making these lists. I'm not going to do this. And then at the end of the time, it can be very difficult because if the mind focuses on so many things, really the message is I'm not good enough, I'm not okay, there's all this stuff going on, and it's just too much at once. So what is so powerful that one thing is worth it? That one thing is worth it. I invite you to just gently close your eyes as you feel comfortable and just breathe into this space. What is one thing that I am willing to give up, to fast from, in order to live and embody a new thought? What is a message I may tell myself or somewhere, somehow, at some point, someone told me that when I'm really authentic in the core of my being, I say, I can't afford to live like this anymore. I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to have that feeling, that thought, that separation, that circumstance, that experience anymore. I'm ready to take that out of my vocabulary. Allow it to come to mind as simple as possible. One idea or phrase that you say to yourself or that you hear, one issue, whatever it is, that if you look at your entire life, you can see if this was no longer present, I would be a new me, and I deserve to live in accordance with the love and the law that was written upon my heart, and this was not written upon my heart. I am ready to take this out of my vocabulary. Just breathe into that for a moment. And now in your mind's eye, think of these words, I am fasting from, and then nutshell it as neatly as you can. I am fasting from. Maybe it's a word, maybe it's a phrase. Make it catchy, make it fun, make it yours. I am fasting from life being hard. I am fasting from emotional upset. I am fasting from words of limitation. I am fasting from words of poverty. I am fasting from being afraid of whatever it is. Just fill in the blank. And then say that phrase 3 times in your mind, I am fasting from. And now allow the birth of the second part. The second part is knowing that I am fasting from, fill in the blank, knowing that, and now fill in the blank with an absolute truth, a truth of God. Knowing that Spirit is my source, knowing that intelligence is always present, knowing that infinite resources are in my life, knowing that I am a child of Spirit, knowing that I am not separate from God, knowing that I live in an abundant universe, whatever it is, a statement of truth, a statement of power, something that when you say it, I am knowing that your whole being feels nurtured and supported, and you know you're okay. I am fasting from blank, knowing that, and your statement. And I invite you to say that 3 times in your mind, and if you choose, bring your hand to your heart, and saying it 3 times in your heart. And bringing it back to this moment. So if you'd like to, you can write it down, but you can also know that as you've held your heart, it's in there. It's known because it came from you and came through you. So here's the deal. You may not be able to, you've probably heard this, you may not be able to stop the birds from flying over your head, but you can keep them from building a nest in your hair. You may not be able to keep the birds from flying over your head, but you can keep them from making a nest in your hair. For the next 40 days, here is your charge. Your charge for the next 40 days is to be, 1, vigilant. Vigilant about watching your mind and watching your experience. And knowing that each time you hear the limitation coming up, each time you may be tempted to say it to yourself or to feel it or to think it, this limited idea, that you are so vigilant, so aware, you don't react, you simply hear it, it simply turns on a light. You simply go, aha, there it is. And then you look at it and you say, but I am fasting. Say it with me, I am fasting. And then you repeat your affirmation. I am fasting from knowing that. And fully breathe it in. Breathe it in mind, heart, and body. Sweep a prayer around it. Let this knowing, let this truth be known in all aspects of my being, conscious and subconscious mind. Because I am fasting from this, knowing that. Vigilance for 40 days. It takes that, and that's such a weird word to use, but I use it because I've practiced it and I know that it takes nothing less. I know that it takes nothing less. It takes being so aware. Because we can tend to fall asleep and just go, but that's not that. But this one's about someone else. This is about something else, and we can let it go. 40 days. Of absolute accountability there. And affirm. Breathe in a new reality. And don't worry, do not concern yourself at all of whether or not this is possible, of whether or not you have the strength, the faith, the commitment. Our only job is to refrain. Our only job is to fast from it. It's the spirit energy, the job of spirit, the job of the high consciousness to show us that at the end of this 40 days, it's no longer as attractive as it once was. Because we are open to being absolutely moved and shifted into a new paradigm. Charles Fillmore calls denials this. He says, withdrawing mental sustenance from low ideals. So we're withdrawing our energy, we're withdrawing the food. We are not partaking. Charles Fillmore said this too. If consciousness departed from principle and formed images that were manifest as disease, discord, any limitation of the perfect, is it not possible for that same consciousness to undo its faulty work and build anew according to wisdom's plan? It is absolutely possible, and it takes our conscious intention and participation. It is not a fast food drive-through. It is not an easy practice, but it is simple. In the Tao Te Ching, it says, the great way is easy, yet people prefer the side paths. It's that simple that it can be in our minds either as hard as it can be and complicated and we could say it's so hard, or in a moment we can make it simple and then through that simplicity it becomes easy. It says, be aware when things are out of balance. Stay centered with the Tao. That centered is what we're calling for. In Eric Butterworth's book, Celebrate Yourself, he talks about what I'm calling the next step. So the first is to be vigilant. The next step is this. At least once a day in meditation, he says, disidentify from your mind so that you can become established at the center of your being as the master of your life. That's what the Tao was talking about. Stay centered, be in the center. So, vigilance. The second is disidentify. Disidentify. Are we willing to give ourselves that at least once a day to disidentify from even being the mind? He says, then carefully establish yourself at the center of your spiritual gravity, and you are ready to deal creatively with anything that may happen around you and to you. He goes on to say this, the secret that is rarely discovered is the realization that you are not a mind, you have a mind, and that the mind that you have can control the thoughts that pass through the mind. This is not to say that control is easy, but it can be done. Through the creative process, thought is a creative process, or should be. You can become the creative thinker instead of the reactive thinker. Just remember, it is your mind, and you can think what you want to think. You must stop letting your grandfather do your thinking for you, your church, the media, or people who irritate you. Whether you know it or not, the choice is yours. Whether you react and thus permit people or conditions to determine how you think, or whether you think the kind of thoughts that you really want to see manifest in your life. You are the thinker of your thoughts. He goes on to say this about life and consciousness. Life is consciousness. You stand where you do today, wherever that is, because of your consciousness. And there is only one way you can come to stand anywhere else, by changing your consciousness. If you wish to go up higher, you can do so. And there is no limit to the heights you can climb. He goes on to say there is a level of life where states of consciousness give rise to limited conditions, and where a cycle of causation flows in kind from negative momentum. I have overcome the world means getting into a higher level of consciousness, experiencing freedom from the limited cycle of causation. Are we ready to fully embrace our freedom? Are we ready to live and embody a new thought? Our systems, our minds are interesting, but they can be learned. I'm going to give you a third tool that I've not done before in a Sunday before, but I think it's time to look at a new practice and to look at the possibility of something else that can assist. I posted this on our website under Reverend Erin's page, and I also put it on Facebook so you can look later, but there is something called EFT. Raise your hand if you've heard of it. EFT. Look at you, Unity people, of course. Some of you are hearing that for the first time, and that's okay. EFT is called emotional freedom technique. One of the things that we practice a lot in Unity is using affirmations and denials. We consciously look at our minds and release things that no longer serve us and bring in things that will be in line with spirit, in line with our true source, in line with wholeness and abundance. But people can get frustrations, right, when that doesn't seem to work. People can use affirmations and denials for a long time and say, but there's something stopping it, it's not working. Well, EFT is a technique of tapping. It combines ancient Chinese acupuncture and acupuncture points. It combines the intelligence of the system meridians. And again, back to the beginning when I said that here I am sitting here listening to the teachings of the yogi, but there's a practice that is something that I already do. Charles Fillmore taught us, if it is scientifically and spiritually true, it should be able to be proven by anyone, proven by me. So if there is something here to be learned, I should be able to utilize it. So we know Chinese acupuncture has been around for a long, long time. This is a system of tapping on those acupuncture points as one releases something that doesn't serve them and brings in something that does. And it looks weird. I mean, you look interesting when you do it. You can do it in your closet at home. If you choose to do it, you could do it in the bathroom and close the door. But here's what it does, and what I posted on Facebook was a video explaining it, because I never really took it on until I heard. I'm a science person. I love the quantum physics. I love the science behind things. I love the intelligence behind things. And without it, sometimes I think, yeah, well, whatever that is. Interesting. But I posted about a 30-minute video from Bruce Lipton, where he explains the foundation of why this works with his studies in neuroscience and the subconscious mind, that the conscious mind is much less in control than the subconscious mind. And if there is a belief and an idea held in the subconscious mind, it needs to be reached and reprogrammed in order for some of these affirmations and denials to work. A lot of times they work without that because there's not something really ingrained. But if you can imagine a tape player or a DVD burner, and you can imagine a program is burned in from a childhood age, a system of thinking, a way of relating, a way of responding, a way of reacting, a criticism, whatever it is. It's in there and it's playing. Unless we consciously re-record something else or take it out, it can be hard to overcome. So I invite you, if you feel called, to check that out and to possibly use that as part of your 40-day practice. I am fasting from knowing that. So let's take a deep breath in. You deserve to live and embody a new thought. The highest idea and expression of who you are and who you came to be. I close with these words from Marilyn Powers in the introduction into the book, The Bridge. She said, no matter where you are in your soul's journey, no matter what has happened to you, I know one thing that is true about you. Every breath, every action, every experience, every moment of your life has had a meaning and a purpose. Your life is moving forward organically, stage by stage, unfolding as part of an overarching plan. Nothing has been in vain. You have successfully completed your life's curriculum so far, no matter what grade you got. Your soul's true journey begins with the realization that you are totally responsible for your life on this earth. You are responsible for giving to yourself what wasn't given to you. You are responsible for your growth and evolution. You are also responsible for understanding and mastering the stages of your soul's journey. Namaste.